Hello. Unfortunately, there seems to be a bit of a backup lighting situation going on, possibly a bit of a backup green screen situation going on today. I don't know if the water behind me looks wrinkled. I apologize. We will get that fixed next time, I promise you. And finally, it seems like there might be a bit of a backup used hair product situation going on today, which is unfortunate, but we are here solely for information and education, so we will make it through. Anyways, welcome back. I'm very excited. Today we're going to be looking at some disturbing and mysterious things found in the deep blue sea. Iceberg videos seem to have gone out of style, so I put together this coral reef of oceanic mysteries. There are 4 distinct themed sections that we'll be going through, so without further ado, let us dive right into it. Our first section is going to be oceanic anomalies. These are things that are due to the ocean interacting with itself, whether it be tides or pressure, anything like that. Nothing to do with human beings or other animals, just the ocean itself. Starting out with whirlpools. These are, of course, those circular sea sensations caused by clashing currents. They may seem benign, but if you get trapped in one, it's very easy to get tired out by trying to swim out of it. Of course, then you get sucked right into the vortex and down into the ocean. Whirlpools that are extremely powerful are called maelstroms. They usually accompany hurricanes and are strong enough to down entire ships and vessels. In fact, some whirlpools are so tight and inescapable that scientists consider them to be mathematically equivalent to black holes in terms of their pull. Bends, also known as decompression sickness. This can happen when you ascend too quickly while scuba diving. What happens is that if you don't properly pace yourself, the nitrogen from your scuba tank that you inhaled will bubble up and start to expand inside your bloodstream, which can lead to this. That gives bubble butt a whole new meaning. Unfortunately, it can also lead to paralysis and death, but that guy survived. Otherwise, I would not be making jokes about it. Mask squeeze. If the bends is what happens when you don't pay enough attention going up in scuba diving, mask squeeze is what happens when you don't pay enough attention going down. See, when you go down while scuba diving, you're supposed to equalize, which means hold your nose and push pressure out of your ears. If you don't do that, pressure will build up, and that'll lead to mask squeeze. Now, I actually saw this happen to my dad once. We were about 80 feet deep, and my friend and I started seeing some green stuff come out of his face, and we thought at first it was seaweed, but then when we started getting closer and closer to the surface, it turned red because the color gradient actually decreases when you go underwater. Red is the first color to disappear. So when we got back up to the boat, we saw that there was blood all over his face, and he took his mask off, and his eyes were literally bulging out of his head. One of the most terrifying things I've ever experienced. Fortunately, usually mask squeeze is actually more of an inconvenience. It can lead to a headache, but if it's serious enough, it can lead to some burst blood vessels that can cause some damage. I was scared of dentists in the dark. What you should be more scared of is the actual riptides. If you've ever gone swimming at the beach, your parents have probably warned you about this one. Riptides are very strong ocean currents due to constricted ebbing tides heading out back to the ocean. If you're caught in one, it can carry you very far out to sea very quickly. It becomes exhausting to try to swim against it. So the conventional wisdom is, instead of trying to swim against the riptide back to the shore, swim like kind of perpendicular to the riptide and out of it back into water where the current isn't occurring. Delta P is a phenomenon that occurs when there's a stark difference in pressure between two places underwater. A good example of this is when there is a scuba diver working with pipes. If they open a pipe and there's no water currently in the pipe, the water gets sucked into the pipe so quickly that the scuba diver can get sucked with it, mangling their entire body. Even if it's a really small opening, their entire body will get sucked into it. Unfortunately, Delta P can get pretty brutal. I think this is what happened in the case of Abigail Taylor, who was a 6-year-old in Minnesota who sat on a faulty pool drain and had her intestines sucked into it because there was a difference in pressure. It can get pretty severe. This one is a lot less morbid. It's deep sea gigantism. This is the name given to the tendency for undersea creatures to be a lot larger than their land-loving counterparts. Nobody's really sure why this happens. Some people think it's because of the colder temperatures underwater, while others think it's because of the pressurized oxygen deposits. Either or, we're going to be talking about a lot of examples of deep sea gigantism later, so get excited. Blue holes, or marine sinkholes, are areas of increased depth forming around banks or islands that starkly contrast their surroundings, creating a kind of ominous-looking abyss. They're not actually that dangerous. The most famous examples of these are the Great Blue Hole, which is about 400 feet deep, and the Dragon Hole, which is about 1,000 feet deep. They just look really cool. The Mariana Trench is one that I'd be surprised if a lot of people didn't already know about. It's the deepest trench and currently the deepest known part of the ocean, with its top depth at a place called Challenger Deep being approximately 35,000 feet and experiencing pressures 1,000 times that of what we experience on land. The only thing able to survive down there is either a microscopic organism like the amoeba or something like that, or the Mariana snailfish. And if you have to look like that, it is definitely not worth it. Well, wrapping up this section, we have the cardinal 80% rule, telling us that we've only explored 20% of the ocean up to this point, meaning there's 80% that remains unknown. Keep this in mind when we talk about the animals, because that means for every one disgusting, terrifying, creepy sea creature, there are 4 that we have yet to discover. I think that ratio makes sense. All right, we are starting now section 2, strange sea creatures. And keep in mind, in this section, we're looking into real animals and real animals. What could possibly be creepy about coral? Well, maybe not to you, but I just recently discovered that coral are not plants, but animals, invertebrates specifically, meaning that those massive growths are more closely related to trilobites and barnacles than cactuses and houseplants. Speaking of which, while writing that, I learned that trilobites and barnacles are arthropods, which means that they're related to spiders. Oh god. Anglerfish are, of course, famous for their glow-in-the-dark fin that they use to lure in prey. This is actually created by a symbiotic relationship it has with a certain saltwater bacteria. But really, the most interesting thing about the anglerfish is the extreme sexual dimorphism of the species. There's a big difference between the male and female. And when I say big, I mean really, really big, because the female can get to about 3 feet long, and the male are some of the smallest invertebrates in the world. I don't know how they make it work, but good for them. Isopods are an order of crustaceans that somewhat resemble lice, although they're only really related by phylum. There are around 10,000 species of isopods, but any of the 20 largest can be considered giant isopods. These are called by scientists a great example of deep-sea gigantism, as they can grow up to 20 inches, which is a lot larger than any of the other species. They live around 1,000 to 8,000 feet underwater and have a nasty reputation for ruining fishing setups. The lionfish is my favorite fish because I have some personal experience with it. See, I was scuba diving, night diving with a friend of mine at night diving. And we entered this small coral cave, and to avoid getting stuck up at the top of it, we started drifting towards the bottom. And right before we hit the ocean floor, we turned our flashlights and saw a whole school of lionfish with their spines pointed right up towards us. So we scurried up really quickly and got right out of that cave. The reason that this was scary to us is because the lionfish's spines are lined, each of them, with an extremely painful toxin that can even cause paralysis. They've recently become an invasive species in the Atlantic, and I even saw one at a water park once, so be careful. But man, they are one of the most gorgeous things in the ocean. The stonefish is similar to the lionfish. Its spines are also capable of administering a toxin, this time being much more deadly, able to kill someone in less than an hour. However, the stonefish differs from the lionfish in that it is ugly. Its camouflage is really well developed. It actually looks like a rock. I've seen one of these before. A couple of scuba divers I was diving with were poking a rock, or so I thought, with their GoPro, and it opened its eyes. Really surreal experience. Also shows how stupid scuba divers get when GoPros are involved. The mantis shrimp is a small shrimp-like creature that has one of the most interesting offensive mechanisms in the animal kingdom. Well, for a shrimp, that is. For us humans, it's a little bit too common. See, the mantis shrimp is able to punch its forearms out at such a rapid speed that the water around it is raised to a temperature of 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is roughly the same as the surface of the sun, by the way. The mantis shrimp uses this super punch mainly for hunting, but it can also be used to slice straight through the flesh, muscle, and bones of a human being, so incredible. Although they are very cute, especially in their ballooned up form, pufferfish are exceedingly dangerous. They carry a poison called tetrodotoxin, which is roughly 1,000 times more lethal than cyanide. The real reason they're worth talking about, though, is because in some parts of the world, they are considered a very, very delicious meal. The chef who prepares it has to be extremely well trained, however, otherwise they are serving up a dish that is capable of killing up to 30 adult human beings. Feather stars are a close relative of starfish, which toe the line between unsettling and beautiful quite vividly. They're known for their eerie way of swimming through the water, and they're also quite toxic, so don't eat them. I mean, I would say, who would eat that, but I have been served dishes made out of literal animal organs at more than one all-you-can-eat buffets, so you never know in this wacky world. The flower urchin is the most dangerous sea urchin in the world, with its spines being poisonous and possibly fatal. The gulper eel, also known as the pelican eel for that great gullet it has, that mouth of its, by the way, makes up around 2/3 of its total 3-foot length. It lives at depths up to 10,000 feet and has a lure on its tail, kind of like the anglerfish, but its real treat is its extendable stomach. Possibly the most famous ocean predator in the world, at least thanks to Steven Spielberg, is the great white shark. Females of this species can reach up to 20 feet in length, and they're responsible for around 1 death every year, so really they're not as bad as their reputation makes them seem. But they will attack you if you look like a seal, so keep that backpedaling on your boogie board close to the shoreline. The goblin shark is ugly. The blue-ringed octopus, like most octopi, is docile and intelligent, unless it is feeling threatened, in which case it will glow neon and bite. Its bite contains the aforementioned tetrodotoxin, which can kill several adults within minutes, so it's best not to mess with it when it's in a hangry mood. Also, it's worth noting here, because we are not going to get into it too deeply, that there is a fringe group of UFOologists who consider the octopus to be possibly extraterrestrial in origin due to its strange biology and incredibly increased intelligence. The Japanese spider crab. I think when it comes to this one, the only word that needs to be used is why. The giant squid is a popular one. It's another example of deep-sea gigantism, reaching around 43 feet in length, and its maximum depth for dwelling is around 3,000 feet under the ocean. And if you thought the giant squid was bad, wait until you hear about the colossal squid, which can reach a length of, drumroll please, 3 feet longer, maximum of 46 feet. I was going to talk about the kraken, the mythical kraken, later in the video, but I decided to leave it out because I think it's pretty much agreed these days that the giant and colossal squid is its real-life inspiration. Also, a fun fact about the colossal squid, it is the largest known invertebrate, or animal living without a spine or backbone of some kind. The big fin squid is a creepypasta Tumblr fan art that somehow ended up being made into a real animal, and no one can convince me otherwise. It can reach over 25 feet in length, with its arms accounting for most of the length. Its method of feeding and predation has not yet been discovered, and personally, I think we should keep it that way. Sperm whales are the natural enemy of the colossal and giant squid. I'm sure you've heard stories of their day-long battles where the squid eventually ends up in the sperm whale's stomach and starts leaving claw marks. The sperm whale is able to accomplish this, swallowing the squid whole, because it's not only the largest toothed whale, coming in at 65 feet maximum, but it is also the largest predatory animal in the world. 52 blue, this one is really interesting. This is a singular whale of an unidentified species. It's become known as the loneliest whale in the world. Although its migration patterns match that of the blue and fin whales, its call is unusually high, being 52 hertz. Some people believe it's some kind of hybrid between two species, while others believe that the whale could be deaf and not able to recognize the call of its own species and repeat it. 52 Blue's unique call has been detected by hydrophones since the late 1980s, but the whale itself has never been seen. The Mosasaurus. Yes, it is the giant water dinosaur from Jurassic World. It was a prehistoric, predatory water reptile that could grow to be up to 50 feet and 30 tons, and it has one of the gnarliest sets of teeth I have ever seen. And the Plesiosaurus. This one is, of course, notable for being what people think, if it existed, was the Loch Ness Monster. The Plesiosaurus in that case lived in a lake, but in prehistoric times it did live in the open ocean. The Shonisaurus sekeniensis, this tongue twister, was actually the largest sea animal to live throughout the entire age of dinosaurs, clocking in at an impressive 85-foot maximum. It was a toothed predatory dinosaur, so I'm sure it killed a lot of things on the open ocean, but it kills a lot more these days at the local spelling bee. Rounding out our prehistoric sea monsters, we have, of course, the famous Megalodon. This shark measured around 55 feet in length, which is 3 times the length of a great white shark, making it look more just like a white shark. However, there are some scientists who say that the largest Megalodon could have reached lengths up to 80 feet, which is simultaneously the coolest and most terrifying science fact. There's also, of course, a group of fringe theorists who believe that there is at least one megalodon left from the ancient age living among us, but that remains unfounded as of yet. Ningen is a modern-day mythical creature created on the internet in Japan, apparently, unless it's real. Its name comes from the Japanese word for human because it's said to have a remarkably humanoid appearance as well as pale white skin, and inhabit the ocean around the Antarctic. Supposedly it's around 90 feet in length, which I think would be pretty hard for the scientific community to miss, but stranger things have happened. The bloop is a very famous unexplained deep-sea noise picked up by hydrophones in 1997. Although the original hypothesis was that this noise was caused by glacial movements, it's become much more popular in the scientific community these days to say that it was caused by some kind of marine animal, although the scientists who say that admit that the low-frequency/high amplitude bloop is a lot stronger than any marine call that's currently known of. The box jellyfish is the most venomous animal in the ocean. Its sting can cause extreme pain and death in a lot of cases. The Australian box jellyfish ups the ante by being 10 feet long. I mean, combined with the fact that these things are barely visible, they can actually become really dangerous when out in the open ocean. And box jellyfish, unlike regular jellyfish, don't drift. They're able to swim at swift speeds of, brace yourself, 20 feet per minute. It's swift for jellyfish, believe me.
Lake Baikal in Serbia, Russia is the world's deepest lake. It's a mystical place with over 3,500 different species of flora and fauna, and over 80% of those are completely unique to the region and don't appear anywhere else in the world. But according to one legend, in 1982, 7 members of the Soviet army were scuba diving in the lake's depths when they encountered what appeared to be gangly 9-foot-tall humanoid figures with jellyfish-like heads. The divers were then thrust to the surface immediately, resulting in 3 of their deaths due to decompression sickness. Although this story has never been substantiated officially, many believe it due to the lake's already isolated wildlife, although some think that the humanoids weren't even native to its waters, but rather an extraterrestrial or even extra-dimensional threat. In 2017, a diver in the Mediterranean Sea discovered this immense skeleton, which in its totality, when the spinal column is aligned, measures at a staggering 98 feet long. The only known animal that could match that is the blue whale, and its skeletal structure doesn't quite match the features of the spine the diver photographed. This has led to many claiming that the skeleton belongs to some kind of sea serpent. And sea serpents are classic beasts that many sailors of the past claim to have encountered in their travels, so you be the judge on this one. Speaking of sea serpents, I think the deep-sea abominable snowman might qualify as one. This is actually not a joke, but a legitimate cryptid that's been making the rounds in paranormal forums online these days. and Reddit user Crofter02 did the research and was able to track down the primary source of the witness Bruce Mounier's encounter with this strange being. He describes it as follows. We were south of Great Isaac Light near the drop-off. I was looking at the bottom while I was being trawled along on a line behind a 30-foot boat built especially for diving and salvage work. I could see a sandy bottom at 35 to 40 feet. I was deep enough to see ahead of the boat, and some sort of round turtle or big fish, about 200 pounds, became visible, and I went lower to get a good look. It turned and looked at me at a 20-degree angle, and it had a monkey's face with its head protruding out in front. A much longer neck than a turtle, 4 or more times the length of a human neck. It rotated its neck like a snake as it watched me. The eyes were like those of a human being, but enlarged. It looked like the face of a monkey, with specially adapted eyes for underwater vision. When it got a good look at me, it took off using some form of propulsion that came from underneath. Wow, that's actually a surprisingly creepy description of the thing. It really scratches the uncanny valley itch. I think it has real potential to become a well-known urban legend if it could just get rid of that name. But then again, maybe the name is part of the selling point. I don't know. The hippocampus is a mythical creature most heavily associated with the Greek god of the oceans Poseidon and his Roman equivalent Neptune, being the beasts that drive his sea-bound chariot. It's depicted as a creature with the front half of a horse and the back half of a fish or eel, and it's no coincidence that in later European interpretations it was literally just renamed to seahorse. The Lusca is a Caribbean folk sea monster that stalks blue holes around the island of Andros in the Bahamas. It's described as being very similar to the kraken, having tentacles and a massive body over 75 feet long, with general octopus and crustacean traits, although it also often appears with a shark-like head. So if you've ever seen the 2010 classic Sci-Fi Channel movie Sharktopus, I guess you just have to imagine an encounter with the Lusca would be similar to an encounter with that film's titular creature. The black demon shark is another shark-like cryptid that allegedly marks its territory off the coast of Mexico's Baja California peninsula. First spotted in 2008, it's said to be between 20 and 60 feet long. Now, some believe it to be a surviving member of the megalodon species, while others believe it to be just a regular great white shark. However, it's said to be abnormally ferocious and pure black in coloration, which is very different from the normal gray coloration of those two shark species. I would say the black demon shark is a great contender for its own sci-fi feature film. However, the Sci-Fi Channel can't claim this one because the black demon shark already has its own feature film called The Black Demon, which came out in 2023. So go check that out if you want to, but fair warning, it has a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. The black carpet is a mysterious creature that was first mentioned on 4chan in 2020. Users stated that although this cryptid is unknown to most, it's actually an infamous legend amongst deep-sea divers, with many claiming to have spotted it while submerged. The black carpet is described as a singular colony of jet-black oily microorganisms that all move in unison, and most who've seen it shifting along the ocean floor agree that it easily stretches over 1,000 feet long. The mass has an amorphous jellyfish-like quality to it with antenna strands that divers have been stung by in the past, and it consumes everything in its path, with one person claiming to have witnessed it pass over and devour an entire sperm whale, which by the way measures in at 60 feet long, leaving only a skeleton in its wake. The microorganisms that make up the black carpet are said to communicate and coordinate their movement through vibrational frequencies, and divers who've witnessed it moving or swimming have said that it emits a deafening sound that's similar to the infamous bloop. For as long as I can remember, there's been a steady but overlooked stream of mysterious, potentially organic white blobs that have been washing ashore onto beaches around the world and popping up in the news. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. Just this year, in 2024, smaller white blobs were showing up in Canada. Witnesses claim that their beaches were covered in hundreds of the mucousy small things, but scientists have yet to discover their origin. Then, back in 2019 in Mexico, a 13-foot long hairy blob appeared ashore. The most famous example of this is the Chilean blob, a staggering 41-foot long monstrosity that appeared on Pinuno Beach in 2003. Some believe that this was the remnants of a giant squid, while others claim it was once a sperm whale. Scientists have a somewhat official name for all of these cases. They call them globsters, and they believe most are severely decomposed remains of marine mammals. Still, they're often unable to definitively identify the origins of these blobs, and our first case in Canada was concluded to not originate from a whale or other marine mammal. So, are these hairy white blobs natural and separate occurrences? Or are they all connected to the same preternatural beast, possibly a rival super colony to the black carpet, a white carpet? Both of the same species, two leviathans that could flounder humankind competing for resources far beneath our notice. That would be a cool concept, wouldn't it? Mermaids are cross-continental staples of maritime lore. Like dragons and goblins, they seem to have popped up in different cultures and mythologies in ancient history across the planet amongst people who had no real contact with each other. So what could have caused this? Could mermaids be real? Well, another reason we're talking about them is that one very special mermaid was at the center of the most famous ocean hoax of all time. The Fiji mermaid was a popular attraction at carnivals and sideshows in the mid-1800s, where many who laid eyes upon it were immediately convinced of the existence of these mythical creatures. But sadly, this was just the work of some very crafty con men who had sewn the head and torso of a young monkey to the rear end of a fish. And wow, only when I say that out loud do I realize how gruesome that process is. The original Fiji mermaid was eventually purchased by the famous American ringmaster P.T. Barnum, who I can only imagine was keeping it as a trophy of a pedigree of animal abuse he'd never be able to legally achieve. But sadly, the supernatural artifact was later destroyed at some point before the present day. Sirens are mysterious bird-like creatures from Greek mythology. They disguise themselves as beautiful women and sit on rocks and cliffs out at sea, singing to sailors and beckoning them to a watery grave. This is a behavior that more malevolent versions of mermaids also sometimes participate in their legends. And these two creatures got me thinking about what many online have now named the Call of the Deep. Allegedly, some scuba divers have experienced their diving partners deserting them and swimming downwards into the depths of the ocean, disappearing forever. As fantastical as this sounds, there actually is a scientific explanation for this behavior called nitrogen narcosis, or in the nomenclature of scuba divers, getting narked. You see, the nitrogen in your scuba tank that you breathe in becomes condensed as you go deeper and deeper into the sea, and when you reach a depth of 100 feet when you're diving, it becomes condensed to the point that you may start hallucinating, which can cause the types of things that people are describing in these stories.
Our final entry into the category of sea creatures is the mythical Leviathan. This is a sea serpent from the Abrahamic religions, who was also at one point noted as some kind of demon prince. But over the years, the word Leviathan has come to mean any sort of sea monster that is kind of beyond the comprehension of the human mind. I think it's interesting to note that the dragons in antiquity, Tiamat, Apep, Hydra, all those, they all have a strong association with water and with outer space, as the sea and the sky were seen as opposing spheres in the celestial systems of those ancient religions. This also applies in modern times sometimes with monsters like Cthulhu, who are from outer space. They're cosmic, but they're also coastal. He lives in some kind of ancient undersea city. And maybe these kind of hypothetical aliens prefer the ocean because it reminds them of the void, emptiness of outer space, their home. Anyways, the point is, there is and there always has been a strong relationship between the bottom of the ocean and the depths of outer space, at least in human storytelling. That's the point. It is getting pretty windy where I am. Apparently there's a tropical storm headed my way tonight, which sets the perfect mood for our next section, Doomed Vessels. The title is pretty self-explanatory. This is anybody who tried to set their course across the sea and met an unfortunate end, and perhaps after that returned to help others meet an unfortunate end at sea as well. Everybody knows the story of the Titanic. It was a passenger vessel that crashed into an iceberg on its way from London to New York in 1912. resulting in the death of 1,500 passengers, one of the deadliest incidents at sea in history. But let's get into something more interesting, and that is the theory that the Titanic was not the Titanic at all, but rather its sister ship, the Olympic. And for that, we need one of these. That is much better. So the story is that the Olympic had already been damaged traveling from England to New York in 1911. So when the Olympic returned to the United Kingdoms a couple weeks before the Titanic was scheduled to set sail, modern-day theorists believe that they had the Titanic switched out for the Olympic, and the Olympic set sail instead with all those passengers on board, because the damaged Olympic being sunk could collect insurance on the Titanic if they thought it was the Titanic, and the Titanic being non-damaged was a lot more valuable than the Olympic would have been if it got sunk. I guess this may have been more fruitful, more, profitable than if they went through the lengthy repair process on the Olympic, but that's the theory. The Mary Celeste was a large merchant vessel that set sail from New York to Italy in 1872 under the command of one Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs. About 8 days into the voyage, the Mary Celeste was spotted by another ship floating idly in the ocean. When the crew of the other ship boarded the Mary Celeste to investigate, they found that it was in perfect condition, except that the entire crew had disappeared. The only thing missing was one lifeboat, but even if there were any survivors, none of them were spotted after the incident. The captain's log's last entry had been 10 days earlier, and it had no hints as to anything that could have caused the crew to go missing. The Flying Dutchman is a ghost ship, not in the way that the Mary Celeste was a ghost ship in that it was abandoned, but in the way that the Flying Dutchman is literally crewed by ghosts, allegedly. Sightings were most common in the 1800s, but apparently the legend of the Flying Dutchman was started in the 1600s when the East India Trading Company was still at the peak of its power. The Dutchman is a cursed vessel. It's never allowed to make port or landfall, so it sails the sea in search of other seafarers, approaching them with an eerie mist emanating from it and a ghastly light at its mast. It'll try to make them meet their end among the tides. So, Andrew Macaulay was an Australian adventurer who attempted to make the almost 1,000-mile journey across the Tasman Sea alone in just a one-man kayak. He constructed his own cockpit device named Casper to keep warm and balance out the kayak in rough conditions. However, the journey that was planned to take him all the way from Australia to New Zealand had conditions much harsher than anything he could anticipate. His kayak was spotted abandoned a month into the journey, and neither Andrew nor Casper have been found anywhere since. I think the most disturbing element of this one to me are the selfies that Andrew took across the entire voyage, where you can literally gradually see the rough conditions and isolation start to take its toll on him. Okay, we have happily reached the final section, which is lost locations. This is, ruins, islands, anywhere in the sea, man-made or otherwise, that's interesting, mysterious, or disturbing, but mostly ruins, to be honest. Oak Island is a privately owned island off the coast of Nova Scotia, Canada. It's a well-known hub for treasure hunters these days, with the most famous legend being that the pirate Captain Kidd left a bulk of his treasure there buried somewhere. I mean, there have been some interesting little trinkets and artifacts and treasures that have been exhumed on the island since hunting started, but the hunters are not satisfied because what they are looking for ranges from lost Shakespearean manuscripts to the literal Ark of the Covenant. So clearly their Holy Grail hasn't been discovered there yet. I say Holy Grail metaphorically, but there might be a crew literally looking for the Holy Grail there, so I should be careful. Still, the island remains a bastion of pirate-era wonder and adventure in the modern age, which is rare, even though the actual pirate era wasn't that wondrous or adventurous at all. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse is a lighthouse off the west coast of Scotland. It is most famous for an anomalous occurrence in the year 1900 when a passing ship noticed that the lighthouse wasn't shining as usual and went on shore to investigate. They found that the crew, the keepers of the lighthouse, Thomas Marshall, Donald MacArthur, and James Dukas, were nowhere to be found. Like with the Mary Celeste, everything on the island and in the actual lighthouse was in complete order, so there are really no hints as to where these guys disappeared off to. The nature and location of this mystery has lent to a lot of supernatural sea-based theories over the years, but I really hope that whatever happened to these three guys, it had absolutely nothing in common with the movie The Lighthouse, because that one was a doozy. The Baltic Sea anomaly is a circular object captured by a group of treasure hunters called Oceanic using sonar technology at the bottom of the Gulf of Bothnia in 2011. Ever since then, debates have raged about whether or not the anomaly is man-made or naturally formed, although scientists do admit that the almost perfectly circular shape is rather strange. Oceanic returned to the scene in 2012 to try to capture it again, but claimed that their equipment failed due to some kind of strange interference. The Yonaguni Monument is another strange underwater formation. A certain geology professor named Kimura from Okinawa claims that it's some sort of lost remnant of an ancient drowned civilization. This is, of course, widely disputed by scientists, but after looking at it myself, I can kind of see where this professor is coming from. I mean, the place seems to have several sort of staircase-like segments built into it, but apparently, according to scientists, this can occur naturally with limestone. Anyways, the monument itself lies deep beneath the southernmost tip of the Ryukyu Islands in Japan, if you ever want to visit it. Heraklion is an ancient Egyptian city which eventually succumbed to earthquakes and rising sea levels due to its coastal location and fell deep beneath the Mediterranean Sea. Legends tell of Heraklion being a haven for knowledge and ancient religions. The ruins of Heraklion were eventually discovered in shallow waters off the coast of modern-day Abu Qir Bay. They are now being studied. The Bermuda Triangle is one you've probably already heard of. It's a triangular section of the Atlantic Ocean lying between Florida, Puerto Rico, and Bermuda. It's had an inordinate amount of shipwrecks and disappearance happen inside it, leading many to believe it's got some kind of paranormal activity happening there. Famed cryptozoologist Ivan T. Sanderson named the Bermuda Triangle a vile vortex, a place where people went missing due to space-time distortions, UFO activity, or a group of ocean-dwelling humanoids. The only other place to earn the esteemed title of vile vortex was the very similar Formosa Triangle that lies south of Japan. Crystal pyramids. So these kinds of pyramids were supposedly discovered in the depths of the Bermuda Triangle by one Dr. Meyer Verlag using sonar technology. The pyramids are apparently made out of some kind of clear crystalline material, but this whole story is extremely unfounded, at least as of right now. Bimini Road is a half-mile-long structure, also near or by some definitions within the Bermuda Triangle. Now this one is definitely real, though people of course disagree on whether or not it is naturally formed out of limestone or man-made. Some people think it's man-made and part of some sort of ancient civilization. I wonder what that could be. Here's what it is. Atlantis. Oh boy, here we go. This is a long one. Atlantis is a fictional utopia inhabited by supernaturally powerful individuals that was first envisioned by the Greek philosopher Plato in stories where it served as an enemy state to his home of Athens. But come the 1800s, scholars and philosophers and historians started discussing the possibility that Atlantis is real, or was real. This is considered seriously fringed by the scientific community, but the general gist is that there was an advanced ancient civilization with technology far exceeding anything we've discovered from previous eras, which was ruined and sank to the bottom of the ocean as a result of some sort of cataclysmic event. This is often thought to have been the Younger Dryas, a theorized series of comet collisions that hypothetically occurred 12,000 or so years ago that supposedly ushered a magnitude of extra water into the Atlantic Ocean, disrupted the climate cycle, caused an enhanced ice age, and vastly affected prehistoric peoples. For this reason, many people unsurprisingly believe that the city is located in the Atlantic Ocean, with some people saying it's beneath the Bermuda Triangle and responsible for every strange happening that's occurred there, using things like the Bimini Road as evidence. Another popular theory is that the legend of Atlantis was lifted from ancient Egyptian oral tradition by Plato's distant relative Solon, and that the real location of at least part of Atlantis is the Eye of the Sahara in the Sahara Desert. Now, this strange formation of concentric circles has been singled out due to the salt deposits lining it, which has led to the conclusion that it was once underwater. And in fact, mostly there are scientists who agree and describe the Sahara as of 10 to 20,000 years ago being a fertile and lush paradise before ancient climate fluctuations caused excess river flooding and rainwater, along with a host of other complications that eventually turned it into the barren desert it is today. So Atlantis believers or Atlantologists describe this event as coinciding with the Younger Dryas. Adding to this, supposedly, but we're really getting into this territory now. In fact, maybe I should make myself another one. Just 1 second. Okay, there we go, fully formed. That makes me feel a lot better. We're about to get into it. So, supposedly, the CIA conducted experiments and surveillance on multiple geographic anomalies in the 1960s, with the Eye of the Sahara being one of them. The whole big picture belief of this entire theory is that there was a massive event around 12,000 or so years ago which wiped out a bunch of advanced civilizations, with Atlantis either being the most powerful or the central city of an empire comprised of 10 kingdoms. There's a lot more to cover with this one and the Younger Dryas, so I'll save it for a future video that I'm planning to do on ancient mysteries. Overall, none of this is at all confirmed. It is considered to be very fringe and pseudoscientific, but Atlantis is the biggest oceanic mystery of all time, and this video is mainly for entertainment purposes. YouTube, please keep that in mind. So I did want to do a bit of a deep dive into it. So in conclusion on Atlantis, it is considered by most historians to be either a fictional retelling of the real-life Thera eruption in 1600 BC that destroyed parts of modern-day Crete, or an elaborate allegory describing the fall of a prideful nation-state at the peak of its power and corruption. I mean, after all, Plato does describe the Atlanteans as being near godlike in their capabilities, so there's no way that any of this is anything but an elaborate fairy tale. Unless they were literally alien! And finally, we have the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is a collection of trash and pollution that is gathered in the North Pacific Ocean. It's been created by a regular convergence of warm Pacific water with cold Arctic water that creates currents that give any new debris a swift ride to join the patch, which now covers 1 million square kilometers of ocean water with toxic microplastics and old fishing gear. I mean, I guess besides being sort of nostalgic of one of my favorite movies, Godzilla vs. Hedorah, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch serves as a stark reminder of the real most disturbing thing that's about to be under the ocean, which is every single one of us. Thank you for watching. Guys, I wanted to come at you with something really cool that I discovered while editing. So, you know how I said at the beginning of the video that whirlpools are caused by clashing ocean currents? Well, recently scientists have been investigating a different kind of whirlpool that seems to be being caused by something deep within the ocean, sucking air or something above the surface of the water down into itself. Now, nobody is really sure what this phenomenon is being caused by, but what is most interesting about this whirlpool is that these whirlpools do not occur concurrently, meaning that this whirlpool only occurs at one given location at any one given time, and then it moves somewhere else. Where are some of the locations this whirlpool has been seen in? Well, the Bermuda Triangle and by the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. What is also interesting that I didn't mention because nobody thought that it was worth mentioning until now is that in the logs of the Mary Celeste and on the Yonaguni Monument are drawings and carvings that appear to be similar to the shape of a counterclockwise whirlpool. This whirlpool is always counterclockwise. Okay, here's where it gets crazy. Keep in mind what I said during the Leviathan section about monsters being from outer space and also living in the sea. Because what people are saying is that 12,000 years ago,